And it is now 18 minutes past 2, and I'm so excited to welcome Hara Ridwani, our sustainable shopper.
I'm glad to be back.
I'm glad you're back too. So Hara from last time we talked about how to sort of do some sustainable swaps in your house. And if you remember, and regular listeners will have heard Hara talk about her YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. You just recently uploaded another fantastic episode about shopping sustainably. So let's talk about that. How do we shop sustainably? What does sustainable even mean, really?
I guess sustainability, the way that I kind of approach it is, sure, you can actually shop from ethical and sustainable brands. I think people who are trying to make the switch to shopping sustainably immediately think, okay, I need to shop from, sustainable or ethical brands. But the truth is that there's a whole other process that people don't know that you can actually go through of shopping sustainably that doesn't require you to purchase new. You can purchase, secondhand, or you can actually borrow stuff from your friends. So there's this whole system that I talk about in the latest video that I posted yesterday on the Buyerarchy of Needs. So I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how the process kind of goes.
Great, because in the video you described 3 steps, and I love that Buyerarchy of Needs. So, and apologies, as you say, to Maslow. Let's talk about that. So when that process is right, I need something, or I think I need something. I want to buy something. Yeah. So then you go through from the bottom up of the hierarchy or the buyerarchy to figure out whether you – so it sort of helps you understand ultimately, are you going to go out and purchase something new, or are there other alternatives? Yeah. So what are the layers to the buyerarchy?
So starting at the very bottom, which is the one that you should always be a go-to, which I feel like for example, if you had a party next week or something like that, I feel like, I guess in previous years, speaking from the perspective of a shopaholic, my first port of call would be like, I've got a party next Saturday. I need to go out and get a new dress. So that's definitely not the case. So I feel like the first bottom layer should be using what you have. So I think in uni, I used to go to parties all the time, and I built up maybe a collection of easily 20 to 30 dresses, which in reality, I probably could have just had 5 and just rotate it between them. So the first port of call is to use up what you have. And then you follow it up with borrowing from your friends. And then after that, if maybe your friends, you've borrowed from them enough and you feel like there are certain things in your wardrobe that you want to give away, and the same goes for your friend, the next port of call is you can actually do a little swap.
Yeah, and that's cool.
Yeah, which I definitely did a lot of that with makeup, sometimes with jewelry or bags as well. Is something that I did in the past. And then once you've finished swapping and, there's nothing else that you can get from your friends or your family, then I would suggest that you do end up purchasing, but you go and thrift and shop secondhand. And there's such a market nowadays for shopping secondhand. I think people seem to think that it's restricted to charity shops or, you going to the markets and stuff like that. But with us living in the digital world, there are so many apps and so many websites that we can go to actually shop secondhand. My first protocol, if I want to buy something, is to actually either go on eBay or Facebook Marketplace. Yeah. And you can get the best deals, I feel through there. So I guess thrifting or shopping secondhand is the 4th from the bottom. And then the 5th one is making it yourself. I'm going to be super honest and say that I am the least crafty person on the planet. So I have never attempted to do this. In my video, which I posted yesterday, I actually said that I had an assignment in high school where we actually had to sew a skirt. And I was so terrible at working the machine that I only sewed half of it. I'm pretty sure I failed that assignment.
Maybe they gave you points for, cutting it out the right way. But, that's great, because that is still something that people can do.
Yeah. If you're creatively inclined, I have friends who knit and crochet and they make things all the time. And I've got this friend of mine, Lucinda, who I think we had another friend, Camilla, who recently just had a baby. And as a gift, she actually she crocheted like a blanket for her, as opposed to buying it, which I thought was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I personally couldn't have done it, but she did it and she loves it. So I feel like that can be an option to people who are crafty. And the very top tier, once you've gone through all of those processes that I mentioned before, is then to actually buy the item.
Yeah. Buy new.
Yeah, buy new. Yeah.
One of the things that I did think about recently, a friend of mine's daughter turned 21, and I commented on her fab outfit, which was really quite glamorous and perfectly standing out as the 21st person at the party. But she rented it. And that's a great one to remember as well. You know, renting isn't always that cheap, but it is sustainable.
Yeah.
And I just thought, when I was a kid, I was a bit, we used to buy new things. We used to make a bit more probably because I can sew a bit more and my mother could sew. So if I wanted something special for a night out, we'd often make something. But, we bought new. We got something new for each occasion, which is very extravagant and not sustainable.
Yeah, yeah.
And that idea that, well, actually you could just rent it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I thought that was a good one to remember as well, especially if it's something very special and you want to look very flash.
Yeah.
But also you don't want to go and spend a lot of money on something.
Yeah, that's a very good point because I've actually I feel like for Halloween parties or like dress up parties, which happens to be a thing in Australia. I don't know why everybody maybe it's my circle parties. Of friends. Yeah,
it could just be.
Seem to be like everyone's so obsessed with dress up and like
that
themed parties.
It is fun.
That is true.
Yeah.
But it's just so bizarre. Like coming from Malaysia, nobody really does like dress up or theme parties, and then to come here and suddenly it's like I've got to have like a Canadian tuxedo. I've got to have like a masquerade or dress up like your favorite TV character. So in that instance, I have actually rented costumes because I'm like, this is so...
That's a great one.
There's no way I'm going to be able to like have this 18th century dress. What am I going to do with it in my closet? I'm not a cosplay person. Like, so yes, I have rented before actually.
So tell me, Hawa, if I get to the point where I go, look, sorry, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to swap it.
Yeah.
I want to buy something new.
Yeah.
What do I need to do then to think about being sustainable and ethical?
Yeah, so I actually go through 5 different questions when I'm actually thinking about purchasing from an ethical or sustainable brand. So the way that I kind of look at it is, number one is I look at their labor practices because I think especially in light of, there was this incident that happened a few years ago where I think, I'm trying to remember. It was
like
in
Bangladesh, I think.
Yeah, it was Bangladesh where like a sweatshop actually, the building itself actually collapsed on itself. And I think people realized from then like the labor conditions that some of these fast fashion brands that we purchase from were horrible. Like in some cases, these people are working 12, 16 hours every single day and they don't have, enough food, enough water, enough ventilation in the system. So no air conditioning, especially in places that are really warm. That's just horrible to put people through that. So labor practices is the number one thing that I tend to look for is people. And then following up from that, I then look into what kind of materials go into the actual item itself, whether it was sourced ethically or sustainably, but also how do they actually produce the item? So do they actually, make sure to reduce how much chemicals go into the actual item? Are they using or trying to use up less water or trying to use recycled materials, that kind of thing? And then after that, I look into the packaging of the item.
Okay.
Yeah, because I feel like...
So if the packaging's recyclable?
Yeah, if it's recyclable, ideally for me, like it's the best when the actual item has no packaging at all. But if not, then I try to look at like the packaging being recyclable or compostable or biodegradable. And then the last thing I look at is what is the brand actually doing to contribute towards sustainability? So are they putting their profits towards environmental research? Are they, looking to try and emit carbon emissions so that they're carbon neutral, that kind of thing?
So do you, I think that sounds quite, I can understand that all of those things are really important, but if I'm just an ordinary person, that sounds complicated.
Yeah.
So is there a way that I can find, that I can somehow in a shorthand way figure out that stuff? Because also I think some of that information is really hard to find.
Yeah.
It's hard to dig down. Like when it comes to a business who's producing their stuff, like their labour practices, I think I was listening to something the other day about this where often the brands will know who originally started creating that item. So if you're getting clothes made in Vietnam, the original factory, but it might have actually moved a couple of times in the meantime, and their control over that diminishes over time, which is an interesting thing in itself. But that means you as the consumer actually don't know. It's hard to find out. Yeah. So is there a shortcut way we can find out that stuff?
I actually use this app, which, don't quote me on this, but I feel like Emma Watson either created it or was part of the initiative.
I love her so much.
Oh, I adore her.
She's really a good activist. I mean, she's an activist. She's very involved in things. She always puts her money where her mouth is.
Yeah, and she's, there for equality. She's like my biggest girl crush ever. I still remember she went to the Oscars, or maybe it was the Met Gala, and clothing that she would rewear after that. I just remember it was like a dress, but you could take off the skirt, and then it ended up being like
it was the Met Gala.
Yeah. Oh, loved it.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. So she created this app, or she was part of the initiative to create this app called Good On You.
Right.
And with this app, basically you can search up any brand that you want, and it will come up with like a rating of, it's a 5-point scale from we avoid, it's not good enough, it's a start, good, and then great.
Yeah.
And the way that the rating kind of works is that they look at their people practices, so labor, planet, so how they try to, reduce, I guess, waste and all that stuff. And then the last thing they look at is whether or not they use animal byproducts or animal. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So that's so good. Okay, so that app is called Good On You, which does help you make that final purchase with knowledge about the company's sustainable and ethical practices. Yeah. So in the end, though, if for some reason, I think that as you raise in your YouTube video, which everyone, please go to Hawa's channel because it's fantastic. She has so many fantastic little snippets of fantastic, excellent information about sustainability and shopping mindfully. But in this particular episode, How to Shop Sustainably, you talk about the fact that sometimes sustainable and ethical products are expensive, and that can be a barrier for people who want to shop sustainably. So if I'm that person, and plenty of people, every day we don't have money for necessarily these goods, which do sometimes become a little bit expensive. What would you say to people who are in that position who still want to buy thoughtfully and ethically and sustainably?
Yeah, so I guess, I completely agree with you. I feel like purchasing from a sustainable or ethical brand, it can be a bit tricky because I feel like to a certain extent, just based on everything that I've kind of seen, is that I feel like being eco-conscious is a privilege to those who have income, like really good income. So I feel like to those who don't have, are able to access these sustainable or ethical brands because of their income, I would say that you should buy items with the intention of keeping it in your wardrobe or in your life for a very long time. Because if you buy something and you keep it and you really take care of it for the next 5 to 10 years, that in itself is also sustainability.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, and you're not being wasteful.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's great. So that's fantastic advice. So even if in the end I can't really afford something that's been produced, in a sustainable, ethical way where we know where the material's sourced, we know the labour practices of the business, we know the business are doing the right thing, even if we can't do that because those products, it's a barrier, cost is a barrier. Yeah. Or even availability maybe is a barrier because actually as well those items aren't necessarily available everywhere.
Yeah, correct.
So that's another reason. So then thinking about buying something to keep.
Yeah.
Is a great piece of advice, I think.
Yeah, because I think the biggest, the biggest barrier to sustainability is that I feel that a lot of people think that it's not accessible.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping to change. And that's why I included that in my video yesterday, is that I want people from all walks of life with any kind of income to feel that sustainability is something that's achievable.
On that fantastic note, Hawa, sustainability is achievable.
Yeah.
And I'm going to follow your fantastic example, and I hope our listeners do too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in today. Everybody, please go to Hawa Redwani's YouTube channel, HAWA, Hara Widwani, and it's Sustainable Swaps or Sustainable Shopping.
Yeah.
Easy to find if you search up YouTube. You are with Kate White on Radio Fremantle 107.9, and it's 2:33, and this is Body Talk. Coming up after this, the change you choose and the change you don't choose.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Hawa.